And good Wednesday morning, everyone. I'm Martina Bills. We appreciate you joining us here on Journey Through Parenthood on the WSAZ Now desk. Today's topic, we are talking a little bit about what the hidden struggles are for younger caregivers, whether you're taking care of a older parent or loved one or spouse, so to speak, just a little bit about really what kind of struggles the caregivers face. And things have evolved since the COVID-19 pandemic started almost 3 years ago. And we're talking to an expert, Jennifer FitzPatrick. She's also an author on this subject. She has 2 books, one releasing in February. So we're going to hear a little bit from her, and then we'll talk a little bit about what we learned from Jennifer.
Just keep an eye on your older loved ones and look for any new changes, anything that's different or new that you might be concerned about. Is there something going on with driving? Are health issues becoming worse? Or have there been falls? So if you start to see any changes, then it's time to probably talk to your loved one, talk to your parent about maybe their needs. What do they need now that they're going through the aging process?
I know it's a harsh reality to understand, but sometimes those caregivers in the hospital or nursing home setting might be burned out. Where do you even go from there when you realize that the person caring for your loved one may need a little change of pace and isn't providing the best of care?
Right. So if you're working with a professional caregiver, whether it's in the home or your loved one is in a senior living community, and you notice that there's burnout, maybe the person's patience isn't what it used to be, or maybe they seem short with your loved one, I think it's really important to have a conversation with that individual and let them know what you're noticing. Also, it's probably a good idea to bring in whoever is in charge of the agency, if it's a home care situation or the senior living community, their boss. I think we have to all be a bit gracious right now, because across the industry, health, mental health, senior living, we have a shortage of every single type of professional. It's impossible right now to hire. And so we have to be a little bit gracious. We don't want to accept substandard care, but we also want to understand that most people that are showing up, they want to be there and they're doing the best that they can. But definitely make it known that you're noticing some changes, or you're noticing that perhaps your loved one's not getting the care that you feel like they deserve. I also think, Martina, you got to pick your battles. You have to be, if one little thing goes wrong one day, maybe don't make a federal case out of it. If you notice a pattern, then definitely have that conversation.
An interaction between a caregiver and your loved one who's receiving the care, if it's not very positive, if there's some things that are changing, how does that affect your loved one who may not be in the best of health?
Well, Martina, I think that we should think about, like, all of us who aren't sick and aging. When we have a negative interaction with a service provider, we get miffed, we get disappointed. But when you're ill, when you're aging, if you feel dependent, and negative interaction makes that individual that needs care feel even more vulnerable. So that's why it's so important to make sure that everybody has a caregiver that's an advocate and that's watching out, which is definitely one of the reasons why I was so concerned during the COVID outbreak about lack of visitation. Because when family and friends are around, visiting, observing, people get better care.
Yeah, and Jennifer, that's what I was just going to ask you. A lot of the facilities shut down, no visitors. That really weighed heavy on people, especially that older generation who needs that, visitation of their loved ones. And those kind of visits really bring someone to life, so to speak, when they're feeling down. Talk about how that all has evolved over the couple of years since we've been seeing all those nursing homes and healthcare facilities in general had changed those visitation policies.
I hope to God that that never happens to another patient ever again. It is so bad psychologically. It's bad for them physically because, again, we know it's common sense. When you have an advocate on site, you're going to get more attention. Everybody in healthcare knows this. Everybody in senior living knows this. So I think it's really important that if you're facing a situation where your loved one is not allowed to have visitors for some reason because of COVID numbers, Tell them, I'll take a COVID test. Somebody in our family is going to take a COVID test and we're still coming, because there's no reason to keep people away. If you test negative, let them in there, and push back on organizations that are being draconian with visiting policies, because it's not good for your loved one. They are going to get better care if they have somebody looking out for them. And like you said a few moments ago, Martina, it boosts their mood. It's good for them psychologically.
My family member is in a healthcare facility and needing care, but yours may be in the same facility and you might be older than I am, or actually there's a younger, person out there dealing with all of this. And the generations are a little different. Your complaint might be different than my complaint. Where do you really choose that battle, and how do you address those issues to make sure your loved one is receiving the best care?
We want for healthcare and mental health organizations to be training on the generational differences. For example, calling an older person by their title, starting out that way. I think, again, it takes a little bit of grace and patience right now, because so many young people are entering the healthcare workforce, thankfully, because we really need them to just, if you prefer, if somebody's calling you, say, by your first name and you would like them to be a little bit more formal, maybe you want to be called Dr. or Mrs., then just ask, say, would you please call me by my preferred name? And this is very important, to just set your boundaries and let people know what your expectations are. Healthcare organizations, most of them are doing the very best that they can to try to train about those generational differences. But right now, it's definitely a challenge.
So let's talk about airing these concerns you have with your loved one's care, whether it be publicly on social media, whether your social media is public or private, you're still putting that information out there about the facility. And where do you go from there? Is it safe to put, complaints out there where your loved one is actually being cared for? Or is that something you kind of would rather recommend saying, maybe hold off on that?
Martina, I'm really glad that you said that. Even if you're private on your settings, people can share, people can screenshot. So my recommendation, I'm not one to suggest venting on social media. I think have a conversation with the staff, have a conversation with the individuals, and go, if you're not getting what you need, you're not getting your answers, go above, go to the corporate office. But at the same time, if you're really not getting anywhere, sometimes tagging the company on social media and saying, look, I really need to talk to somebody. I'm not getting certain issues resolved. I really need help. That can work. But I would really be really careful about venting too much on social media, because not only is it not a good look for you, but we also don't want to air our loved one's dirty laundry on social media. Think about, would your mom, would your grandparent want all this detail about, okay, they're incontinent, or that they didn't get their medicine, or that they fell? Think about that and those are the kinds of things you want to have a conversation, an email with staff. It's much better to do that than share that on social media. Think about your loved one's privacy. Would they really want all that out there?
When you have caregivers coming into your home, how does that all change to make sure that the person needing the care is getting what they need, if you're the caregiver looking for those kind of options?
So the best thing to do, in my opinion, is go to an agency that vets, licensed, bonded, that they do criminal background checks. I think a lot of people make the mistake is, okay, I've literally seen it. You put it out on Facebook. Does anybody know someone that can hang out with my mom while I go to work, or help out while I go to a wedding? I don't love that way of finding help, because you sometimes really don't know who you're getting. And when you have somebody coming from an agency, it's going to be more expensive, but they have training. They have supervision. There's typically a nurse that's going to check in with you and make sure that you and your loved one are happy with the kind of care that you're receiving. They'll work with that person to coach them around areas that might need improvement. But the other thing that I think is so important about that is, if you randomly select somebody in your neighborhood or something like that, what if that person gets sick? What if that person has a family emergency? Then if you've been relying on them for care, there's no replacement. With an agency, even though you're paying a little bit more, the nice thing is they're going to usually work with you to try to find a replacement if there's something happening with your regular aide.
Okay, Jennifer, so you are an author, and your first book, Cruising Through Caregiving, has been out, but the Reimagining Customer Service in Healthcare is actually being released soon. Tell us about these books.
Reimagining Customer Service in Healthcare is actually for healthcare executives and professionals, and it's about how to provide the best possible service to your patients and clients. So what you probably need in your family, Martina, is the Cruising Through Caregiving. And that is really speaking directly to a family caregiver. What kinds of things do you need to talk to your loved one about? What kinds of things, the financial, for one, talking to your loved one about money, because most people at some point, they're going to need to spend some money on care. What's the budget? How are the finances? Another thing that Cruising Through Caregiving helps you look at is the legal aspect. Does your loved one have advance directives or a will or trust in place when they pass, or if they become unable to speak or share information about what they would desire for their health care? So the other things that are in Cruising Through Caregiving that are really helpful to families are a lot of exercises about where to find help if you don't have a big budget in your family for senior living or home care. How do you naturally find help in your friend, family, neighbors, faith community network?
So a lot of good information from Jennifer FitzPatrick, who is an author and expert on caregiving advice. So some things that I took away from my interview with Jennifer, whether you are the caregiver yourself or if you are looking for a provider, a caregiver for a loved one, do not accept substandard care. And Jennifer said that things have really changed throughout the pandemic in nursing home facilities, in hospitals, and any kind of setting of doctor's offices, or if you have in-home care for a loved one. But these agencies are oftentimes stretched thin. They might be shorthanded. And if something, you see some sort of issue that you think is a pattern, you got to kind of really or notice the pattern before you speak up on behalf of your loved one, and don't settle for that substandard care, but have a conversation with the person in charge. And that's why Jennifer recommends going through a reputable agency for maybe in-home care for a loved one, or finding a facility, because if you rely on someone to come into your home to offer some caregiving for your loved one, that person may not be reliable, not have good backup resources if something were to go wrong. So a lot of good information, because Jennifer really hits home on the fact that the interactions between a patient and a caregiver are so important, no matter the healthcare issues that the patient is dealing with. But any kind of negative interaction really makes the patient more vulnerable. So Jennifer's books, I'm going to show you the titles of her books so you can actually find them. They are available on Amazon. Cruising Through Caregiving, Reducing the Stress of Caring for Your Loved One, is available on Amazon right now. And that's kind of, if you're looking for how to find a facility or a provider to come into your home to care for a loved one, that book from Jennifer FitzPatrick is where you'll want to go for that. Now, her newest book is actually going to be released in February, and you can pre-order that on Amazon. It's called Reimagining Customer Service in Healthcare, and that kind of goes over the changes that have actually evolved in the last almost 3 years because of the pandemic. So a lot of good information from Jennifer FitzPatrick. And really, if you do not have a loved one that you're caring for right now, this is a good topic to think about. For as your loved ones do get older, something may happen that you don't expect, and all of a sudden you need some help